Bethesda's Starfield is an interesting beast. I say that because at launch, the game was met to overwhelmingly positive reviews. They flaunted having like 10 million players within the first couple of days. But since then, it just feels like with each passing week, month, the impressions on this game have gone from, yeah, this is a pretty decent experience to, yeah, this is actually just not good enough and it's really bad. Even in my own review of the game at launch, I played about 100 hours before launch day, got a code, not from Bethesda, just fortunate to have some connections, but I thought it was pretty good. I just didn't feel like it was good enough in the year of 2024. And that's kind of the big problem I've had with Bethesda the last half decade, or actually the last decade since Skyrim, is the fact that a lot of these Bethesda games just don't feel modern. They feel very dated, and the excuses a lot of people use, especially those that love Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, is saying that, well, this is just how Bethesda games are. And I just don't feel like that's an excuse that holds up nowadays, especially when you look at some of the other open world RPGs that are being produced, such as like Cyberpunk with its cutscenes, or even Baldur's Gate 3 with its heavy RPG mechanics and different gameplay elements of those. But I will say that one thing about Starfield that stood out was that it did improve on a lot of the aspects and a lot of the gameplay mechanics that we saw in like Fallout. I mean, the shooter mechanics work a lot better in Starfield. It's just the fact that it doesn't feel good enough, especially with the fact that the main aspect of this game was flying planet to planet. When you have so many loading screens in between, it really ruins the immersion. And then the fact that you have 1,000 planets, and a lot of these planets just feel extremely empty with so much procedural generation, the AI really playing a major hand in creating Outpost 1, which you've seen 1,000 times, because it's just copy and pasted. It's another problem I had with Fallout 4 with its Radiant Quest. That's just the design aspect of Starfield that doesn't flow, and it doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work for many others, which is very interesting because Bethesda very much went with that design mantra of we want people to be playing this game for years to come, but it feels like that backfired in big ways because of the fact that a lot of the handcrafted content that was produced just is not good enough, and it's too far apart, especially in terms of these cities, these actual locations, these handcrafted locations, such as New Atlantis or Neon. They're very small and they're too far apart. And yes, a lot of the time you're having to fast travel, and it does ruin immersion, which I think is a major aspect of games like Fallout and Skyrim, the success stories of those games at the very least. But 6 months later, we do have impressions like this coming from Paul Tassi. He was one of the most positive reviewers for Starfield. He gave it a 9.5 out of 10 at launch, and he said, was I wrong about it? And that's what I mean. We have a lot of people second guessing themselves as this game has gone on, and Bethesda has done pretty much nothing with the game support. But yes, again, the game it does have achievements, not many of them, but it does. One striking observation from a report was that Starfield emerged as the sole single-player game to make it to the top 10 on Xbox and PC in terms of monthly average users, even without PlayStation data due to it not being released on that platform. Which, yeah, that's an achievement for the last couple of months in 2023. And then, yeah, the reviews for Starfield, that's a pretty good review score. I think Fallout 4 was right around that, but the actual impressions on this from users is much different. This was 3 months ago, in which the recent reviews, about 7,000 of them, was mostly negative. And then even if you check it today, it's right now mixed with only 40% of the reviews being positive. And then all reviews, almost 100,000, only 60% of them are positive. That is not good. And there is no just conspiracy about people going against Bethesda because of blah, blah, blah. It's just a lot of people don't feel good about this game. And it's especially a lot of those people that are sticking with this game, trying to see all of the content through. It just doesn't feel good enough, especially when you look at some of the gameplay mechanics, the loading screens, the jankiness. Those excuses just don't hold up in the year of 2024, especially compared to other open world RPGs, which I feel are really setting a new example, and Bethesda just feels like they're flowing in that 2000s era, and it just doesn't work in my opinion. That's why there are concerns for the future of this company, especially in regards to the Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5 inevitably. But yeah, on the most played games on Microsoft, as you can see, we got the list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the first 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Then finally you get Fallout 76, which has more players right now than Starfield, at least on Xbox, which maybe makes sense because it is a live service. But then you have Skyrim and Fallout 4 with actual more players than Starfield right now. Maybe that changes with DLC. Maybe it does. But right now, definitely not the greatest. And actually, if you check the Steam charts, right now the game only has about 5,000 players actively playing the game, and it continues to drop with each passing month. If you compare it to Cyberpunk 2077, a game that was mired in so much controversy at launch, and it was also a new IP, or mostly a new IP to the gaming industry, it never dropped under 15,000 players. So again, that game had a lot more anticipation, a lot more hype behind it, but it also had probably it is the biggest launch disaster ever. So I just find that interesting. And then if you go to Bethesda's history, especially their last game, specifically Fallout 4, in terms of post-launch support, that game got a lot more content right away. Automatron, that was their first big DLC, kind of big. I think there was a quest attached to it, and there was some other new mechanics introduced. March 22nd, 2016. That was about, 4 months after Fallout 4 launched, right around there. And then Wasteland Workshop, that was about another month later, a couple weeks later. Far Harbor in May. Then there was a couple of other smaller DLCs until the final one in August of 2016. And so far, Starfield just has not gotten much. I mean, the people are upset with some of the support that has come about because, Starfield update misses the mark again with questionable new feature. What is that new feature, you might ask? It's a photo mode. It's a photo mode in which you can do a couple of new options with it. And a lot of people just not understanding why is that being the priority right now. And I mean, if you compare Bethesda with how they worked on Fallout 4, it really is kind of disappointing. But if you compare it to other developers like Cyberpunk 2077, although that game had a lot more issues, it took them a lot longer for CD Projekt Red to get that game on the right path, and that took years. And I don't think Starfield's going to get that support. At least I don't think so. But this is what so far has been produced. There was a Digilock, and using the undo no longer costs a Digipick. That was one of the mechanics that came about, one of the few quality of life things that came about, and that was recently. Back towards the end of 2023, these were some of the announced stuff that were coming to the game. There was a brightness and contrast controls, HDR calibration menu, FOV slider, DLSS support, ultra-wide monitor support, and an eat button for food, all stuff that probably should have been there day one. Furthermore, they also had their biggest update yet in January. It was just bug fixes and improvements, nothing really notable about that. And then there was FSR 3 that was released, I think, earlier on this year. And then there was another update just about a month or so ago in which there was a couple of other improvements again. The photo mode stuff, we're improving the scanner so you can continue to use it to monitor the world around you while harvesting resources or opening doors. And then, again, just a couple of other smaller things. Nice to see them, quality of life improvements, but people are looking for things that are more substantial, and Bethesda has teased some of that in the past. I mean, they talked about towards the end of 2023 having city maps and new ways of traveling coming to Starfield, but it's been 4 months now, 5 months actually, and nothing has been announced at all by Bethesda. If you actually go down here specifically, I believe they mentioned at some point that there was going to be new update. Yeah, here it is. It says, the studio said that going forward, it aims to roll out significant new features and fixes every 6 weeks or so. I think we probably should have followed up that with asking Bethesda when did they plan for this to happen. Maybe that's sometime this summer, but so far there's just been no communication at all from Bethesda. I think that's another reason why players are so upset with them. It's just there's no communication at all with the direction of Starfield. Obviously, we know that a major DLC is on the way with Shattered Spaces. Again, I assume that'll probably be coming later in the year. But hey, maybe there's going to be a huge new collection of features, new ways to go about the game. There is a lot more developers still working on the game for what it's worth. Bethesda has said, this was again 4 or 5 months ago, but yeah, 250 Bethesda devs are still working on the game, so I imagine they're working on some cool new stuff. Are they going to totally transform the game? It remains to be seen. But again, things have been fractured in terms of the gaming community with Starfield. These are some of the examples. Starfield Together will no longer be developed by the same modders that made Skyrim Together. This is a big story a while ago, but pretty much just to summarize this, there are modders that have no interest in Starfield because the game is boring, bland, and the main draw of Bethesda games, exploration in a lively and handcrafted world, was completely gone. And that was always going to be the case with Starfield. I think especially the lore, the setup, this will be something we talk about in a separate video, but I just don't feel like Bethesda did well enough with making people interested in this franchise, because I have no interest in Starfield 2. I don't care about the factions, and all the cool shit that actually happens in Starfield happens before you even get into the game, unfortunately. And the Starborn just it's just not very interesting to me. And especially the new game plus thing, especially with you losing a lot of your what you've crafted, such as some of your outposts and such, it just doesn't feel worth it. And I think that's a big problem that Bethesda has in terms of that mechanic and people being interested in it. Maybe that changes with Shattered Spaces. Maybe they make it somehow a little bit more interesting, but right now it just, who cares? I guess that's the big takeaway I have with that. Yeah, but like I said, there are modders working on this game. It's not completely gone. This is a good example. Yeah, Starfield. That's pretty cool. And yeah, but like, I mean, there are modders working on Starfield. I do think it is ridiculous, some of the narratives that I saw a while ago in which people were saying that, oh no, nobody's interested in Starfield. There is definitely a community there. It's just much smaller compared to Fallout and the Elder Scrolls. Yeah, there's a couple of other examples. I think that Starfield does really well with stuff. There are aspects of the game that I do appreciate, such as the physics, and I do think if you go to a different engine, yeah, that's cool. I mean, go to a different engine with Unreal Engine or something. It creates issues. I just don't know what Bethesda's answer moving forward past Starfield is. And refining their engine just doesn't seem to be, it's not working well enough, in my opinion. But yeah, there's a couple of other examples. Like I said, the physics in Starfield, it's really cool. This is cool stuff. I don't feel like Bethesda takes advantage of a lot of this well enough. Like, it's really cool that you can stick like 1,000 pieces of toast in your ship and stuff, but how does that make the game actually, you know, enjoyable beyond just seeing like a couple of videos that you look, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, but I don't want to do that myself. And I don't think most players do as either. I think most people are just looking to the actual narrative, the characters, the factions and stuff, and there are flaws with that too. But like I said, this is another example of some of the physics, some of the aspects of the game that's pretty cool. You just have your ship like attacking UC ships while you're on the eye. Like I said, there's some cool stuff that happens behind the scenes when you're just looking around in Starfield. So I definitely don't think this game is just absolutely horrible. I just feel like the areas in which it needed to be good, it's just not good enough, especially in, you know, in the year 2024. And here's another big thing. This is probably one of the most impressive aspects of Starfield. It's those ship mechanics. There's some really cool ships that you can make, but it's also one of those things that you really don't get to take advantage of until you're towards the end game, which is a number of hours deep into Starfield. And I think a lot of people just bow out earlier on, which is, again, a problem for Bethesda. But yeah, this is another aspect that I just find absolutely insane that it was launched this way and it still has not been fixed. Skyrim's in-town map 12 years ago versus Starfield, it's just always been horrible. And that was another thing that irritated me. Just finding stuff in the game is so annoying. And then there are bugs still. This is going to be an issue. This is something that Bethesda has been ironing out, but this is the jankiness that I talked about at launch. Even in my own review, I had a number of examples of it. Some of the bugs are fun to laugh at, but if you're experiencing them yourself, it gets really annoying. But they have been hard at work with improving the game. It definitely is the most polished Bethesda game to date, but that really isn't saying a whole lot because of the fact of how bad most of their games have released. But yeah, then people have been bringing up for a while now just the flaws with the experience. The game lacks a lot of evil companions, and it certainly does, especially since you do any sort of neutral evil act in the game. Most of your companions absolutely hate you for it, which yikes. And then we do have this Reddit post. Starfield feels like it's regressed from other Bethesda games. 15,000 upvotes. This was right around launch. I tried liking it, but the constant loading in a space environment translates poorly compared to games like Skyrim and Fallout. With Skyrim and Fallout, you feel like you're on the world and can walk anywhere you want. With Starfield, I feel like I'm contained in a new box every 5 minutes, and that is definitely the case. Everyone says Bethesda missed the mark with no vehicles on planets, but I think the real missed opportunity was no space radio, and that is another thing. It's a small thing, but a lot of the time in these Bethesda games, whether that be Fallout 4 or even Fallout 76, I found myself enjoying just walking around, exploring these maps and having the radio on. And sometimes I put my own music on, but having that in-game radio just does feel like it's something that is missing. If I had to take a guess, that's something they'll probably end up working out with the upcoming DLC. But there has been some rather interesting reports and some things that Bethesda has been saying about the game's development, which is a little bit like, it's interesting. Starfield's lead quest designer had absolutely no no time and had to hit the panic button so the game would have a satisfying final quest. And this specific article, there was some uproar over how it was written, but I just feel like the internal politics and how Bethesda is structured may be causing issues with the development process. The creation of this lengthy final quest was all very last minute, according to former Starfield lead quest designer Will Shen, who left the studio recently, and only came together out of necessity and urgency. He continues, "We were finally at a state in the project where we could play through the whole game, and it became very clear that we were missing the large final location that was going to tie the story together and have a satisfying action-filled payoff. I was both implementing the main quest and leading the quest design team, so I have had absolutely no time. The entire quest design team was already overbooked. Part of the issue, Shen said, was the sheer size of the team working on Starfield. Skyrim had 100 people, which made collaboration between different departments easier. That team size grew to about 150 for Fallout 4, then 350 for Fallout 76, and 500 plus for Starfield, and that includes all of the Bethesda studios, not just Bethesda game studios. According to Shen and Brigner, the sheer number of people working on a game across different studios can cause problems. It's more difficult than ever to know who does what, who you're supposed to report to. A fractured team can also create a silo effect where every department is scrambling for resources and saying no to collaboration requests, said Shen. This can lead to the inadvertent consequence of favoring the department over the needs of the game, as well as slowing even basic collaboration between departments to a crawl. And that's why when some people say that Bethesda just needs to keep on hiring, that isn't necessarily the answer. The structure and how everything is go about behind the scenes and stuff definitely seems like it needs to be reworked. Maybe that'll be the case with The Elder Scrolls 6, I hope. But again, I've been saying stuff like this for a while now with Bethesda, and it doesn't seem like too much is changing behind the scenes, especially in regards to like their engine and such, which we've endlessly been talking about for a decade now, and there just doesn't feel like there's been enough movement on that area. But in terms of the actual development process, every request now has to go through all the producers because we need to check all of the contingent work. Asking for something as simple as a chair wasn't so simple. Do you need animations for it? Do you need sound effects for it? How much does that add to the schedule? Can it not fit because of one of those teams does not have the time? So that's just a little bit of an inside account of the behind the scenes work on Starfield, which it does feel a little bit concerning, honestly. Now, there was also this. I thought this was a rather astonishing development. Ex-Bethesda developer says Starfield could have focused on 24 solar systems, but people love our big games, so let's go ahead and let them have it. This was, I think, a lot of people's takeaway after playing Starfield. If Bethesda had stuck to maybe just one solar system and just had built so much handcrafted content on these planets and allowed people to seamlessly go planet to planet, it probably would have worked a lot better. And it does appear that Bethesda, they specifically did not want to do that. As this ex-Bethesda dev and Skyrim's lead designer Bruce Nemsmith, who worked a little bit on Starfield earlier on before he left the company, suggests a more condensed galaxy was on the table, only if for a moment. There's a lot of discussion about the scope of the game. At one point, I said I bet this game would be a lot better if we restricted ourselves to about 24 solar systems. However, the team saw an opportunity to leverage procedural generation, which was one of the worst aspects of Fallout 4, and I think Skyrim had a little bit of it, to cut down on the workload of going even bigger. Once you've done one solar system, doing 100 is not really adding to your work all that much, although the problem is that it's just empty planet after empty planet, and it's just not enjoyable to go to the same space rock just with a little bit of a different color. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. He does continue. He goes on to list the types of planets players might want to explore, then remarks, just doing our own solar system, all the variety that you have to have that, you've done 90% of the work for the rest of it. I guess, but he remarks that the team decided people love our big games, they love that open area to explore, so let's go ahead and let them have it. However, even Nesmith admits that most of the game's core meat is locked to a few dozen systems. Even then, they're too far apart. Todd pretty much pulled the number 100 for the number of star systems out of thin air, but the more we went on, the more it was like, okay, so the core activity all takes place in these 24 in the settled system region, and the rest of it is open space. And that was the design philosophy for Starfield, and I think a lot of the audience for Starfield just didn't feel like that worked well enough. Again, impressions on this, there's been all kinds of conspiracies, like we have this one, people theorizing that the game was so much different late into the development process. I personally don't believe that was the case. I think that a lot of the aspects of Starfield, I think it was on purpose. I think that's what Todd Howard and his team wanted. I just don't think that they understood what the gaming audience specifically wanted from Starfield, and I also don't think that they did well enough of a job creating this world, the lore and such, and also making things feel seamless. Or, you know, the reliance on loading screens and stuff was acceptable in 2011, but in 2023, it's just not. Now, again, since launch, there has been some other controversy that has come about. Bethesda has been responding to some of the negative reviews on Steam. I thought that it was absolutely funny. I did my own dedicated videos on it, but Bethesda had some AI-generated responses for people calling it not boring, actually, and pretty much just telling Steam players that you're not understanding their vision for the game, which I thought was honestly hilarious. But yeah, like I said, right now, people are trying to find any hints for what Bethesda is planning, some hope for the future of the game, because right now it has aged poorly. Starfield is not good enough, and when you're comparing it against to all these other open world RPGs that have been produced the last couple of years, it does not stack up well to them. I mean, there have been improvements across the board. A lot of the stuff I put in my review, especially with the dialogue options, they listen to the criticisms they got from Fallout 4. The shooting mechanics feel so much better. It just feels like the improvements just were not good enough. You needed to take more of a jump. But I do feel like their Gamebryo engine, which then turned to the Creation Engine, now it's like Creation Engine 2, it just isn't working. And there is no specific answer. I think a lot of people say, well, maybe they'll just switch to Unreal Engine, but that also comes with its own constraints. I've heard from other developers that have worked with Unreal Engine, especially in terms of open world games, saying that there is issues alone with that. And Bethesda, a lot of their expertise is specifically with their engine that they've been working for the last 20 years. So it isn't just something that you can quickly, easily do. So there is no obvious answer. And Bethesda seems to be very dedicated to just continuing to improve their proprietary engine, different aspects of it. And with the Elder Scrolls 6, man, if we still continue to have that feeling of datedness, I don't think that the gaming audience is going to be very happy, especially with the fact that there will be a wait of about 15 or so years between Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls 6. There will be a revolt, and I'm sure Bethesda at least has to know that. Now, with Starfield, I don't think there is that dedication with this franchise. I think a lot of people are like, well, I wish the game would have been better. I'll move on, play something else. But there's so many people that are diehard fans of those franchises, and maybe Starfield does improve. That is the hope. Maybe this summer when they do announce stuff for this upcoming DLC, again, people have been looking, they're finding hints, I believe, or at least they think they are. The problem is with Bethesda, you just never know if this is actual glitches and hints or if it's just, you know, another bug, because Bethesda, again, their games are very infamous for it. But yeah, there's some very weird stuff going on. Hopefully this does set up, you know, this franchise to have some sort of future that people care about, because right now I think it feels like an open and done case, and people are like, don't want to see any more Starfield in the future. We don't need a Starfield 2. And even then, the game, how the story goes, it just doesn't feel like there's much more that they can do. I'm sure they could introduce stuff, but it does feel like very open and shut with the whole Starborn arc and all of that stuff, and you know, the multiverse nonsense. But yeah, like I said, this was all according to Todd's plan. This is the dream game he wanted to make. It was NASA Punk, and I think that a lot of people wanted more from Starfield, and that's why right now you check those Steam reviews and you see so many people just very disappointed, more to loading screens than gameplay. And again, there is a lot of people that still enjoy Starfield. I'm not going to ignore that. I mean, there is a lot of people, but it's also just, this is definitely the most people besides Fallout 76 that are very up in arms about the quality of Bethesda experience. Go play Morrowind. Refunded when I realized your ship was a loading screen to space. Boring and not worth your money. And again, just goes on and on, all kinds of different reviews. A lot of people, like I said, it's very mixed with this experience. And myself, I personally think that this game is continuing to age poorly because of the fact that Bethesda's support has not been enough. It's been 6 months. Fallout 4 already had tons of DLC. Far Harbor had already released by now. And I think if they haven't released Shattered Spaces by, I think it's around June, Fallout 4, all of its DLC had already released by then, after like 7 or 8 months. So with Starfield, maybe they're taking more time because they feel like they have to iron out more gameplay mechanics. It's just the problem is there's no communication at all coming from this studio about the future of the game, which I think is bothersome to a lot of the players that are right now staying committed to this experience and trying to wait it out for Bethesda, because the state of this game is just very sad right now. It's embarrassing, honestly. And it does continue to age poorly, especially up against the competition. But anyway, what do you make of Starfield right now? Are you continuing to play the game? Have you checked it out since launch? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value, and consider subscribing for more videos like this. I'll see you later.